Did you know that the Roman army, one of the most disciplined and effective fighting forces in history, had a secret weapon that was far more brutal than any sword or spear? It was something they faced every single day, and it wasn't the enemy. Stick around, because the truth about a Roman soldier's life is so much harder than you imagine. By the end of this, you'll understand what that terrifying secret weapon really was. When we picture a Roman legionary, we see the polished helmet, the segmented armor, the iconic shield. We think of disciplined marches and glorious victories. But the reality was a daily grind of pure, relentless hardship. Forget the heroic movie scenes. The average soldier's life was a masterclass in survival, and it started the moment you signed up. Enlistment wasn't a choice for the desperate or the poor. Initially, it was a duty for Roman citizens who owned land. You were expected to serve for 25 long years. Imagine that, a quarter of a century. And the recruitment process itself was a brutal filter. Probatio was a rigorous physical examination. You had to be at least 5'10", in peak physical condition, with good eyesight and hearing. Any sign of weakness, and you were out. They weren't just looking for bodies. They were looking for men who could endure the unimaginable. Once you were in, your old life was over. The first thing that hit you was the training. It was designed to break you down and rebuild you as a cog in the Roman war machine. New recruits, called tyrones, were subjected to a grueling 4-month boot camp. You'd march 20 miles in 5 hours, then do it again at a faster pace, carrying over 60 pounds of gear. This wasn't a gentle jog. This was a forced march, under the watchful eye of the centurion. A man who carried a vine staff not just for show, but to beat discipline into anyone who fell behind. The training didn't stop with marching. You were given a wooden sword and a wicker shield, both double the weight of the real things. For hours every day, you'd hack at a wooden stake, practicing your strikes, your parries, your footwork. You'd learn to throw the heavy pilum, the Roman javelin, with deadly accuracy. You'd practice formations until they were second nature, moving as one entity, a wall of shields and steel. This relentless drilling ensured that in the chaos of battle, your actions were pure muscle memory. But a soldier's job wasn't just fighting. In fact, most of their time was spent on something else entirely: manual labor. Roman soldiers were the empire's construction crew. They built everything: forts, roads, bridges, aqueducts, canals. If it needed building, the legions built it. They were engineers, masons, and surveyors. That famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," many of those roads were paved with the sweat and toil of soldiers. They'd spend their days quarrying stone, digging ditches, and felling trees. This wasn't a side gig. It was a primary duty. It kept them physically strong, disciplined, and too exhausted to cause trouble. Now, let's talk about where they lived. Forget comfortable barracks. On campaign, you slept in a leather tent, the papilio, with 7 other men. That's 8 soldiers crammed into a space barely 10 feet by 10 feet. It was crowded, it smelled, and it offered little protection from the elements. In colder climates like Britain or Germania, the damp and the cold were constant enemies, leading to sickness and misery. In the desert heat of Syria, it was a sweltering oven, and in these tents, your privacy was 0. You lived 8 and slept shoulder to shoulder with the same men, day in and day out. And what did they eat? The soldier's diet was monotonous and practical, designed for energy, not pleasure. The staple was wheat. Each soldier was given a ration of grain, which they had to grind themselves into flour using a small personal hand mill. From this, they'd make a type of hardtack biscuit or a porridge called pulmentum. It was bland, but it was fuel. They'd also get some cheese, sour wine mixed with water called pasca, which was safer to drink than plain water, and occasionally some bacon, lentils, or salted meat. Foraging was encouraged, but you can imagine that fresh food was a rare luxury. You had to cook it yourself over a shared fire after a full day of marching or building. This brings us to pay. Roman soldiers were paid, but it wasn't much. From that meager salary, deductions were made for everything. Food, clothing, boots, bedding, burial, it all came out of your paycheck. Even the nails for your hobnailed sandals, the caligae, were something you had to pay for. After all the deductions, a soldier was left with very little. The real financial prize was the retirement bonus, a plot of land, or a large sum of money, but you had to survive 25 years to get it. Many didn't, and the discipline. It was famously brutally harsh. The centurion was judge, jury, and executioner for minor offenses. Falling asleep on watch, losing your equipment, or showing cowardice could earn you a severe flogging. For more serious crimes, the punishments were terrifying. Fustuarium was a death sentence for desertion or dereliction of duty, where the convicted soldier was clubbed or stoned to death by his own comrades. And if an entire unit was deemed guilty of cowardice, they faced decimation. The unit was divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The unlucky soldier was then killed by the other 9. Can you imagine being forced to kill one of your tent mates, a man you'd trained and fought alongside? This brutal system ensured that the fear of your own officers was often greater than the fear of the enemy. Let's not forget the constant threat of disease. In crowded camps with primitive sanitation, sickness spread like wildfire. Dysentery, typhoid, and other infections were rampant. A simple infected cut could be a death sentence. In fact, historians believe that disease and infection killed far more Roman soldiers than combat ever did. The army had medics, medici, but their knowledge was limited. They were good at treating wounds, but they had no answer for the invisible killers that lurked in the water and the soil. So after all this, the brutal training, the back-breaking labor, the terrible food, the crowded quarters, the iron-fisted discipline, and the constant threat of disease, what was that secret weapon I mentioned at the beginning? It wasn't a physical object, it was the discipline. But not just any discipline. It was a level of mental and physical conditioning so extreme that it forged men who could endure anything. The Roman army took ordinary citizens and systematically stripped them of their individuality, and rebuilt them into a collective that could function and fight under the most horrific conditions imaginable. They were trained to march until their feet bled, to build until their muscles screamed, and to stand their ground while their friends fell beside them. The daily hardship was the point. It was a whetstone that sharpened them into the perfect soldiers. The man standing next to you in the shield wall wasn't just a colleague. He was the man who survived the same hell you did. You trusted him implicitly because the system had proven he was trustworthy. The true strength of the Roman legion wasn't the sharpness of its swords, but the unbreakable spirit of the men who wielded them, a spirit forged in the fire of a daily life that was, by any measure, harder than you could ever think. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this glimpse into the real life of a Roman soldier fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see uncovered.